You may believe they are not afraid of losing you. They move through life with the quiet certainty of someone who assumes you will always be there. They behave as if the connection requires no effort, as if the bond will never fade, no matter how much distance they create. But the human mind is far more complex than the image people show the world. Deep beneath awareness, the unconscious keeps a record of everything the conscious mind tries to push aside, and sooner or later it demands to be noticed. This person does not truly understand the weight of your absence until something inside them begins reflecting the reality they have spent so long avoiding. The version of themselves they believed in slowly starts to crack. Their confidence becomes less stable. The emotional distance they once depended on no longer feels safe. That is when everything begins to shift in ways they never expected. If you want to understand the deeper psychological reason why someone seems unafraid of losing you, stay with this until the very end, because what is happening beneath the surface is often completely different from what you see in everyday behavior. The unconscious has a remarkable way of hiding emotional dependence behind a calm face and a mask of indifference. Keep watching because the next part explains why this hidden process changes everything. Sometimes a person truly believes they are completely independent, calm, and untouched by emotional attachment. They convince themselves that they do not really need anyone. They tell themselves they can leave whenever they choose without feeling any lasting effect. Yet beneath that confident surface, something much deeper is quietly taking place. What appears to be emotional strength is sometimes a carefully built defense designed to protect them from uncomfortable feelings. The ego creates a strong wall because admitting the real depth of attachment would challenge the story they tell themselves every day. It would force them to recognize how much comfort, meaning, security, and emotional energy they have unknowingly connected to another person. Deep inside, parts of their emotional balance may already depend on your presence without them even realizing it. Still, the conscious mind continues repeating the same familiar message. It says they are completely fine. It says they are not attached. It says they are simply enjoying the relationship without needing anything in return. That story becomes their shield. It protects them from facing the anxiety that would appear if they admitted how valuable the connection has quietly become. And what happens next reveals why that shield can never stay perfect forever. In many relationships, another person begins carrying hidden pieces of someone's inner world without either of them noticing. They may represent qualities the individual has never fully accepted within themselves. They may reflect confidence, peace, emotional safety, hope, or even the future they secretly long for. Little by little, the relationship becomes a place where these unrecognized parts of the personality are placed outside the self. As long as life feels predictable, this hidden pattern remains invisible. Everything seems normal. The connection continues, and because nothing appears to threaten it, the person never questions what is happening beneath the surface. They believe they are simply choosing to stay close while remaining emotionally independent. But the truth is much more complicated. Their sense of stability may already be connected to your presence in ways they cannot consciously explain. Since there is no immediate challenge, they never feel the need to examine those hidden emotional ties. The illusion continues because nothing forces them to look deeper. But stay with me, because the moment that illusion is interrupted is the moment the entire psychological picture begins to change in ways most people never expect. The connection seems natural and almost effortless. Their emotional energy quietly moves through the relationship, giving them a sense of comfort, peace, and balance, without them fully realizing where those feelings come from. Everything appears steady. Everything feels familiar. They believe they are standing on solid emotional ground, but part of that stability may actually be connected to someone outside themselves. Then life changes, distance enters, circumstances shift. One person slowly pulls away, begins growing in a different direction, or simply becomes less available. In that moment, the unconscious starts responding before the conscious mind understands what is happening. The hidden attachment that stayed invisible for so long suddenly rises to the surface. The person who always looked calm, may begin feeling emotions they never expected. Anxiety quietly appears. Fear becomes harder to ignore. The desire to reconnect grows stronger than they imagined possible. Even they may be confused by their own reaction because it does not match the confident image they always carried of themselves. The mask of indifference begins to crack. The emotional investment they unknowingly placed outside themselves starts returning all at once. What they depended on without awareness can no longer remain hidden. This unexpected disruption becomes a powerful turning point because it forces them to face the parts of themselves they have avoided for years. Stay with me, because the next part explains why this moment changes everything. What once looked like emotional confidence may actually have been a personality built around avoiding fear instead of understanding it. The version they presented to the world was carefully shaped to maintain control. They wanted to appear calm, steady, and completely unaffected by emotional uncertainty. In close relationships especially, some people create the impression that nothing can shake them. They seem grounded, they seem untouchable. They behave as though another person's presence or absence has no real influence on their inner world. But appearances rarely tell the whole story. Behind that peaceful expression may exist a hidden emotional landscape that has never been fully accepted. There may be quiet fears, deep insecurities, and vulnerable feelings that the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. Those emotions remain in the background, waiting patiently until life creates a situation where they can no longer stay hidden. A person may believe they are emotionally strong simply because they never show fear. But genuine strength does not come from pretending emotions do not exist. Real strength comes from understanding them, accepting them, and learning from them instead of running away. Keep watching because this hidden difference explains why confidence can disappear so quickly when the relationship begins to change. The illusion of emotional security feels convincing because it protects a person from facing difficult truths. By acting as though nothing affects them, they avoid looking at deeper fears that have been quietly living beneath the surface. They avoid confronting feelings of loneliness. They avoid recognizing how much emotional stability they may have received from the relationship itself. Slowly, the connection becomes a place where hidden emotional needs are carried by someone else. Without realizing it, the other person starts representing comfort, confidence, safety, hope, or a sense of completeness. This creates the temporary feeling of being whole, but that feeling is not fully built from within. Instead, it depends on something outside the self continuing exactly as before. The fear never truly disappears. It is simply covered by a calm appearance and pushed far into the background. They move through the relationship with confidence because the deeper emotional wounds remain hidden from awareness. Yet anything that depends only on external stability is naturally fragile. Lasting emotional security requires the courage to look inward, to face hidden fears honestly, to accept uncomfortable parts of the personality, and to reclaim the emotional energy that has been placed outside. Until that inner work begins, every unexpected change threatens the illusion. Every moment of distance creates discomfort. Every sign of possible loss forces the person to realize that part of the strength they believed belonged entirely to them may actually have been supported by the connection all along. That is why the emotional mask can suddenly fall apart. The deepest fear is often not simply losing another person. The greater fear is meeting the parts of themselves they managed to ignore while that person remained close. At that very moment, something important begins changing inside the individual who once believed they were completely secure. The ego starts feeling a strange emptiness that cannot be explained with simple words. What once seemed to be only about another person slowly reveals itself as a much deeper process taking place within their own mind. This is more than disappointment. It is more than sadness over losing control or watching life change unexpectedly. It becomes a powerful inner experience that brings hidden parts of the personality into the light. The old way of understanding the relationship no longer feels stable because something much deeper is asking to be recognized. It is as if the mind is quietly inviting the person to become more aware of who they really are, beneath every defense, every fear, and every carefully protected image. This moment can become the beginning of real inner growth. It is the point where the person stops running from themselves and begins discovering a stronger foundation that no longer depends entirely on someone else's presence. And once that process begins, nothing inside them remains exactly the same. Deep inside every person is an inner guide that quietly pushes them toward becoming more complete, more balanced, and more connected with who they truly are. When that deeper part of the mind begins to speak, it rarely arrives in a calm or comfortable way. It often shows itself through anxiety that seems to appear from nowhere, emotional confusion, restless nights, powerful dreams, or waves of feelings that are difficult to explain. This inner pressure is not meant to punish anyone. It is a signal that something important needs attention. It is an invitation to wake up and see what has been hidden for a long time. The person is slowly being asked to face the parts of themselves they kept avoiding. They must begin the difficult process of taking back the emotions, hopes, and qualities they unknowingly placed onto another person. The things they believed only existed in someone else must gradually be recognized within themselves. This can feel overwhelming because an old version of who they believed they were starts falling apart. For a long time, they may have built their identity around the relationship, the attention they received, or the emotional role they played. Now life asks a different question. Who are you when another person is no longer carrying those hidden parts for you? What feels like an emotional crisis is often the beginning of real change. Stay with me, because the next part explains why this uncomfortable moment can become the doorway to lasting growth. The old sense of balance often has to break because it was built on patterns that remained hidden beneath awareness. A stronger and healthier balance can only grow when both people are willing to face themselves honestly. Something surprising happens when one person begins changing from the inside. Their personal growth can quietly awaken deep fears inside the other person. As someone becomes more aware of themselves, they naturally begin creating healthier boundaries. They reconnect with their own goals, values, and desires. They stop searching for constant approval. They recover their confidence and begin living in a way that feels more honest and true. From the outside, this simply looks like healthy progress. It reflects maturity and emotional growth. Yet for the person who unconsciously depended on the old relationship pattern, this change can feel deeply unsettling. The emotional structure that once felt familiar begins shifting beneath their feet. Suddenly they may feel uncertain, even when nothing dramatic has happened. They may sense that something valuable is slipping away despite the relationship still existing. The fear is not always created by what is happening today. Very often it rises from much older emotional experiences hidden beneath the surface. Keep watching, because understanding this hidden layer changes everything about how you see these reactions. Old fears of being left behind can quietly come back to life during moments like these. This is much deeper than ordinary insecurity or temporary discomfort. It touches emotional memories connected to separation, rejection, loneliness, and the fear of losing connection. When one person becomes emotionally stronger and more independent, the other may unconsciously feel as though they are losing the very source that once made them feel emotionally steady. The hopes, expectations, and emotional comfort they quietly attach to the relationship begin fading. Before this shift, the connection may have followed an unspoken pattern. One person constantly offered reassurance, emotional support, or stability. The other grew comfortable inside that arrangement without fully realizing how much they depended on it. But when the first person begins standing confidently in their own identity, the entire emotional balance changes. Even if they still care deeply, even if they remain present, even if they never intended to leave, the other person may still experience the change as a painful form of abandonment. The unconscious mind does not react mainly to facts. It reacts to emotional meaning. That is why the response often feels much bigger than the situation itself. Panic may appear, anger may surface, clinging behavior may increase. Some people suddenly become distant or emotionally cold. These reactions seem confusing because they are connected to old emotional wounds that existed long before this relationship ever began. This moment reveals just how deeply two people can become connected through hidden emotional patterns they never recognized. One person's growth quietly forces the other to face a dependence they may have spent years denying. Although this awakening feels painful, it also serves an important purpose. The unconscious does not bring hidden wounds into awareness without a reason. It reveals what is asking to be healed. It invites the person to look honestly at the parts of themselves they kept avoiding. Until both people recognize this pattern, the relationship can remain trapped inside the same emotional cycle. One continues reaching for freedom while the other searches for safety. One keeps moving toward personal growth while the other tries to preserve the past. Every major emotional change eventually presents a choice. A person can turn inward, face their fears with honesty, and slowly build a stronger inner foundation. Or they can repeat the same patterns in another relationship, hoping for a different outcome while carrying the same unresolved pain. The fear of losing someone often stays hidden until life shakes the old emotional structure. For years it may remain buried beneath confidence, control, and carefully built emotional defenses. As long as both people continue playing familiar roles, everything appears peaceful. The ego mistakes that quietness for real security. But that stability depends on nothing changing. The moment one person begins growing from within, the illusion starts to fade. Real transformation creates movement. It shines light into places that once remained hidden, replacing avoidance with awareness and opening the door to a stronger, more genuine way of living. It brings truth to places where comfort once kept everything hidden. And when that happens, the emotions that stayed buried for years slowly begin to rise. The moment a person truly starts growing from the inside, their entire emotional world begins to shift. Real inner growth is a lifelong journey. It is the process of becoming the person you were always meant to be, instead of living through old habits, outside expectations, or false versions of yourself. As someone becomes more aware of who they are, starts creating healthier boundaries, follows a purpose that feels genuine, and stops expecting another person to carry their unfinished emotional needs, the relationship naturally begins to change. What once felt safe and predictable no longer feels the same. The emotional exchange that once happened without effort begins to transform. The person who quietly depended on the old pattern may suddenly feel as if the ground beneath them is moving. They may experience fear, not because they are truly being rejected, but because the invisible emotional agreement that once held everything together is slowly disappearing. That fear reaches much deeper than the present moment. It touches old emotional memories of separation, loneliness, and the painful feeling of no longer belonging. As long as nothing changes, the mind can continue avoiding those hidden emotions. Familiar routines create the comforting illusion that everything is secure. But when real growth begins, comfort can no longer hide what has been waiting beneath the surface. Stay with me, because the next part reveals why this hidden shift changes everything. The fear rises because something deep inside is asking to be seen at last. What once looked like confidence may quietly reveal itself as avoidance. What seemed like complete independence may actually have been protection built around old emotional wounds. What appeared to be emotional distance may have been a defense against vulnerability all along. Sooner or later, the unconscious asks for honesty. It refuses to let hidden emotions stay buried forever. This is often why certain moments in life feel surprisingly meaningful. Sometimes an unexpected event arrives at exactly the right time. It may be an unexpected message, a chance meeting, a vivid dream, a period of distance, or a life experience that suddenly changes the way everything is seen. To someone else, these moments may appear ordinary, but for the person living through them, they carry a meaning that cannot be ignored. They feel like a quiet wake-up call coming from somewhere much deeper than everyday thinking. The defenses begin weakening. The carefully protected image starts falling away. The person who believed they had nothing to lose suddenly realizes something valuable has been changing all along. The emotional comfort they quietly depended on begins fading. Old patterns stop working. Hidden emotions ask to be acknowledged. The mind gently pushes the person toward greater awareness, inviting them to face fears they have spent years avoiding. Keep watching, because understanding this process completely changes the way you see emotional distance. Real and lasting connection cannot grow while two people continue placing their hidden emotional struggles onto each other. Both people eventually need the courage to face what has been living inside them all along. Every person carries parts of themselves they have rejected, hidden, or refused to accept. These may include painful memories, fears, insecurities, anger, sadness, shame, loneliness, or even strengths they never believed they deserved to express. Relationships often become the place where these hidden emotions quietly appear. One person may express the anger the other refuses to admit. One may carry the vulnerability the other keeps avoiding. One may become responsible for emotional needs that were never truly theirs to hold. This creates an intense bond, but it is also fragile. The attraction feels powerful because each person is responding not only to the other individual, but also to the hidden parts of themselves reflected through that relationship. In many ways they are seeing pieces of their own inner world without realizing it. But everything begins changing when both people choose personal responsibility instead of emotional blame. Rather than expecting another person to complete them, they slowly build strength from within. They stop running from uncomfortable feelings and begin understanding them with honesty. This takes patience, it takes courage, it requires facing truths that are not always easy to accept. Yet this is where genuine emotional freedom begins. As those hidden parts are accepted instead of avoided, the emotional energy once trapped in fear, projection, and conflict slowly returns to where it truly belongs. The relationship no longer becomes a place where two wounded people struggle for control. Instead, it becomes a meeting between two individuals who are each becoming stronger within themselves. Love begins changing its shape. It is no longer driven by fear, desperation, or the hope that someone else will rescue an empty part of the heart. Instead, it becomes a conscious decision shared between two people who respect each other's freedom while remaining deeply connected. Love grows from inner fullness rather than emotional emptiness. Difficult moments still appear because every relationship faces challenges. But those challenges no longer destroy the bond. They become opportunities for deeper understanding, honest conversations, and continued growth together. The relationship grows stronger because it is no longer carrying the heavy weight of hidden emotional wounds that were never addressed. This becomes the foundation of a connection that can survive distance, personal change, unexpected seasons of life, and the tests that every meaningful relationship eventually faces. And this explains why someone who once seemed completely unafraid of losing you may not recognize the truth until life forces them to look inward. What looked like confidence may have only been a carefully protected image. What seemed like emotional security may have hidden old fears behind quiet defenses. What felt like love may have included expectations that neither person fully understood. The moment you begin becoming more complete within yourself, old emotional patterns naturally awaken. Hidden fears rise into awareness. The parts of yourself that were ignored begin asking to be seen. The greatest loss was never simply another person's absence. The deepest loss was becoming disconnected from the life, the strength, and the person you were always capable of becoming. And once that truth is finally understood, everything begins to change from the inside out.